Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. I'm John Brandt, Director of Professional Practices and Innovation here at ISACA, and this is CyberPros. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to have my guest, Naomi Buckwalter, on our podcast again today. She recently opined on burnout, right? In a blog post titled "Burned Out InfoSec Professionals Sound the Alarm." For those of you that may not know who Naomi is, and I find that hard to believe, but she is one of the more outspoken leaders in the industry. An absolute pleasure. I love outspoken people who are having and forcing the hard conversations. Naomi, welcome.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here again. Thanks for having me.
No, absolutely. We're going to have a good time here. So in preparing for this conversation, I reread your article, and you know, you've written for us a few times now, and it actually took me back to a few months earlier in the year. You had actually written a blog on the 5 memes, and number 5 actually is relevant to this one, right? Where it's the individual riding the bicycle with the stick, right? So the self-imposed injury, right? And we wonder why we're burned out. So let's open and you talk about what are some reasons for burnout in the industry?
Oh man. Well, let me preface this by saying, you know, that article I wrote for you, John, I was actually burned out while I was writing that article. It took me so much longer than I originally intended. I'm like, this will be easy. I'll just copy and paste people's quotes. Boom, you got an article. It took me so much longer because I was just literally like, oh, I just have to get this done. I just have to get this done. And I kept emailing you, John, I'm not going to have this done by Thursday. I mean, Sunday. I mean, Monday. I mean, Wednesday. And so it just kept dragging and dragging. It's because I was burned out. And it was just, it's like the most ironic part of it is when I was writing the thing on burnout. I'm like, yeah, I'm also burned out. Should I write that in the sentence somewhere? But that, anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I think it's just so pervasive in our industry today. We are overworked. We are so given so much responsibility in our day-to-day, and we're on the hook for all the breaches and all the bad things that could happen in terms of cybersecurity, and we're feeling it. We are feeling it. I'm feeling it. I mean, I've been burned out a few times now. The people that I'm talking to on the day-to-day basis, they're burned out. I know for a fact, you know, my team members might be burned out too. I don't want to give them any shout outs or anything, but they know who they are because we've had these conversations, and it is pervasive in our industry. And it really comes down to too much to do and too little time to do it, or too few people to do it with.
So let me ask you something. So we've been writing about the doom and gloom of not having enough people for a long time, right? And you're familiar with the work that ISACA is doing here, and we continue to try to drill down into this. To be fair, right? And we understand that we don't have enough people to go around. But do you think that we are more susceptible now? And I frame that in the context now we're 3 years into the COVID pandemic now, possibly it's considered an endemic, and we know that a lot of different occupations are feeling the hurt. So do you think we're more susceptible than others right now? And if so, why?
Well, I'm not in any other industry, so I can't really tell you, but from my little bubble in the corner of the cybersecurity industry, I can tell you that it does seem like a lot more people than ever are burned out, or they're just being more vocal about it on social media. Now, I've seen the studies, I've read the news articles, and it really is kind of new, not just from COVID, but the remote work thing that's happening over the past few years, that has just completely shattered any norms of work-life balance, because you're here working, and then you're also at the same place where you're relaxing and eating and all this other stuff. So it's hard for your brain to separate the two. The work-life balance, it just bleeds into one giant work bubble. And the American work ethic and ethos, and you know this because you're one of them, but we're just expected to be online and to work, and you never take vacations. And we're starting to feel that because we're just working remotely, working all day, every single day, being on call 24/7, 365. And cybersecurity, I think, has that very interesting twist to the thing, because we also care about getting breached and solving insecurity issues that we have. And so we are constantly stressed out about that. So are we a little different from other industries? I think so, just because of the amount of stress that we put on ourselves sometimes, but then also the expectations from our leaders and our managers, to keep our companies secure and our data secure. But then again, that's take that with a hefty dose of salt, because I'm not in any other industries. I really only know about cybersecurity. But from what I can tell, just that push to remote has helped, really not helped us actually, has really hurt us in terms of work-life balance, and therefore caused the additional stress and burnout that we're seeing today.
I'd agree a lot with that. And I've got the conversations I have even with my team, right? And we're not, quote unquote, in an operational role right now. The team that I lead are responsible for leading their practice areas and responsive to members that are, span everything from audit all the way to emerging technologies and everything in between. So it does beg the question, right, is what are companies doing then, right? Because at the end of the day, there's these expectations, and we see a lot of this, right? The Great Resignation, right? Employees they're fed up and they're rolling out, and retention challenges have been high for so long anyway. And, and one of the things I advocate for is it's not just about the money, right? Which largely ties into some of what you're talking about, because there's no time to really unplug. And I think that especially for your smaller teams, they're even more disadvantaged. And again, that expectation that you're kind of always online because you're not in the office, that becomes very dangerous, right? And not only for those of us, but then others. And then I guess from your vantage point, when we talk about, one of the things I look back over my career, and we always advocate, right? Businesses need to understand what normal is. And the pandemic really threw that out the window, right? Because whereas maybe, your company was largely an 8 to 5, and now all of a sudden you have people working around the clock. How do you think that's influencing it? And from what you're doing right now, is that potentially what's contributing to more incidents?
Just being online all the time, or having to work all the time, or expected to work all the time?
I think being online and not knowing what normal is, right? Because, think about it. It used to be when you were doing your discovery, you were looking for indicators of abnormality, right? So somebody signing online late night might have been a red flag in the past. I can tell you, working alongside my colleagues, I see people online all hours of the day anymore. So I think that to put on the operational hat, I think it becomes that much more challenging to discern what's real.
Or they're working from different areas of the world. People working long vacations or work vacations over in Tahiti, and then they're logging in from Mexico, right? And all these places. And you're just like, what? I agree with that. I think the normal has changed. It's shifted a little bit. The Overton window and conversations on what normal is has changed. And that is an interesting conundrum that we have, because we do want to understand what normal looks like in our traffic and our activities and all the things for operational reasons. But we also want to normalize conversations on what healthy looks like. So that work-life balance conversation doesn't happen very often, at least in my experience. We don't talk about what is expected from each other and from our customers, from our managers. We don't push back when somebody asks us to work or take over a shift for on-call, right? There's these conversations that need to really happen for us to start understanding what healthy is and what unhealthy is. Because right now, I can tell you right now, John, it's pretty unhealthy out there. People are always online. They feel stressed out. They feel that they're, accountable for this stuff and responsible for this work. But, what can I say? You aren't a machine. You cannot do this 24/7. You're going to burn out.
No, you're absolutely right there. And I don't know that there's any easy answers there, other than the fact, what it highlights even more is the criticality of soft skills that continues to come up. So not only in your ability to for the industry practitioners to talk to the business leaders, talk to the customers, talk to each other, but also now, because what I'm hearing, right, is we're now more than ever, we're blurring these professional and personal boundaries. And if anything else, when I was on active duty and led a lot of people, like at the end of the day, the mantra was, if you take care of people, they'll take care of you. And in my decades since I hung up the uniform, boy, that sentiment doesn't carry very far in the corporate world, but I think it needs to, right? At the end of the day, and not everybody, nor is every culture comfortable having some of those conversations too, because they really kind of, for some people, they're an open book. And I'll be the first one to be like, listen, I'm stressed the heck out, right? Like, I got to unplug for a little bit. Others will just keep grinding, and they're of the mindset, hey, I don't want to open up that part of my world to you. I'm here in a transactional capacity. I do a task, you pay me a salary. I don't want to know anything.
That works. And I hear this thing called quiet quitting is making its way through the news and social media. And it's a trend now, right? Quiet quitting being, I'm just going to do what I'm paid for, nothing more, nothing less. And you pay me a salary and we are trading products, and the product being my labor, right? Like for a certain amount. And to an extent, I agree with that. Like that is the healthy conversation that I'd love to see normalize here, at least in the States, where the work ethic is more towards that Puritan, like old school, you need to work hard and grind, otherwise you are nothing, right? Your identity is tied to your work, kind of thing. I would love to see us shift to that. I know other areas of the world, certainly Europe, is not tying their identity to their job. Places like China are more and more so too, where they have that lying flat kind of thing, that whole trend. It's the same idea. We are tired, we are burned out, and we're figuring out what life is all about, like why we're here and why we exist. Like, is it to grind and make money, or is it to actually enjoy life in the time that we have, right? We are not here for very long. So we might as well take the paycheck, work 9 to 5, and then take the weekends off. However, and I will say this, security is just so much harder to do that, right? Because you take the time off, but that work is waiting for you when you get back. And I know that's not anything special to security. I'm pretty sure there's other jobs within the company that, not security jobs, but other jobs that also have the same problem. But with security, it's like alerts, things that you don't want to miss. So things that might have happened, you don't want an incident to go undiscovered for a long time. So you have to go backtrack and look at that stuff, at least operationally. For people who don't do security operations, you still have projects to keep going, moving forward, and people are waiting on you for answers and resources, right? So there's plenty of things where security needs to be doing continuously that is causing the burnout and the stress and the ability to not unplug, at least in my opinion.
So, right, protection related or protection oriented industries, you're absolutely right. And it takes a certain kind of mindset, right? Like, as there is with different occupations too. And I think what's one of the things that concerns me, looking at how we're going to continue to source human capital for this, and if you look at anything that's protection oriented out there, from any kind of first responder to the physical security world, like it seems like, and again, just one, in my opinion, for what that matters, like the tolerance and the appetite to do that type of work is increasingly just lessening year after year right now. And I don't know that there's any easy solution to that, other than we have to find a way to get creative in how we're doing this, and potentially break the model of how we staff this, right? I think back to, and again, if we look at the fact that largely, especially if you're in e-commerce, you don't necessarily close the doors anymore. Right? Like if you're not just brick and mortar, you've got a persistent presence. So does that really lend itself to shift work? And again, what's the appetite of people out there to do that? In my former career, I loved shift work. I loved working nights because I had all day to do everything, and it was great because you rarely got called in after time. And then when you went to day work, it was like, oh yeah, that's so great. And then it was like, oh no, you day workers work a lot more than I do, right? And I think that's the the battle where we're in. But you highlighted in your blog some really, the quotes from different people. And there was a couple in particular, that really stood out. One was about buying into the culture, right? And earlier this year, with our 2022 State of Cybersecurity report, I found some research by PwC, and they described this 4 worlds of work. And I really saw that as pivotal, and there was some alignment to what one individual had written, and you captured in the blog, where it becomes a little bit, I think, more natural if your personal values and the corporate values are aligned, right? And everything from a whether you're entrepreneurial, whether you're capitalist, whether you're green, right? Or there was another one too. That was, but if you were to dig into that, and we don't do that for any occupation, right? And I think that it could help deter some problems down the road, because now all of a sudden, if that's the corporate culture, and then that's how, the individuals who work there are largely aligned, instead of it treating it just as, oh, you're cybersecurity, it might actually kind of help frame the conversations a little bit easier, because it's shared values, and then you could kind of tweak how you approach it. Because I'm sure within your career, and I've heard it from a lot of people, and I've personally encountered it, it's like, this shouldn't be this hard for you to quote unquote get it, right?
Well, I mean, I agree to a certain extent that passion and the alignment of your values are going to get you so far, at least in terms of not having to burn out. So, but not everyone's going to have a company like that. Some people just work for a giant behemoth and they don't know anyone other than their immediate teammates and their manager, right? They're just a number, and they don't feel as aligned as somebody in a smaller company who has that benefit of having their personal values aligned with the core values of the company, which is very nice. However, in general, the industry actually has that wonderful benefit of, we are doing the right thing. We're on the good side. We're the good guys. So we are fighting cybercrime. We are trying to help the world. We're trying to do the right thing. So I think in terms of aligning any personal value, at least to a core value like that, will help immensely. However, I know that can only go so far, right? Sometimes I do work just for the paycheck. I will tell you that, John, because burning out or just aligning myself to passion and working for the passion isn't enough some days. Like some days I'm just like, fuck this. I am just here for the paycheck, and that is good enough for me. And you know what? Other times I'm like, yeah, I'm doing this totally because I want to help the world and change the world and blah, blah, blah. But like, it really just depends on the day, honestly. And I'm sure that's true for a lot of us. And we're human. We're going to have those moments. We're not robots. We're not going to go in and be like, I'm here just for the passion. I'm just here for the mission. And like, literally that is the dumbest thing. And like, I'm sorry, if somebody's doing it just for the passion, you are going to hit that wall so hard. You're going to wake up one day, you're going to find yourself just sitting up and be like, what have I been doing? I've been aligning with passion and now I have no passion. What am I doing now? Right? Like, so you're going to lose that sense of identity or that control over your life where you want to make a difference and you want to make a difference, but now you're not seeing that difference being made. So that whole worldview is now shattered for you. And so now you are walking around like a zombie thinking like, okay, I have this skill set and I don't really know if I want to continue in cybersecurity because I don't align with the mission anymore, or I just don't see the impact that I'm having, right? Or that I want to have. And that's how we lose people. And we lose people left and right. Like in the survey that the article was written about, it was something like 75 or 65% of the people who took the survey are actually looking to leave cybersecurity within the next couple of years, right? Like that is scary to me. Out of the 500 or so people who took the survey, 65% of them are like, yeah, I feel like leaving the entire industry in less than a year. And I'm just like, well, that's horrible. Like we just need more people. We don't need less people. And that's part of the problem. Like we feel so trapped in our jobs. Like we've got those golden handcuffs. I don't know how you feel, John, but you're here for the paycheck sometimes, you're here for the mission sometimes, and you feel like you're in a good position. But at any one of those moments where one of those things kind of drops and now you're just holding on to the bag and you're just like, oh, this isn't enough for me, right? I need more. Then we're feeling that as an industry. A lot of us are looking elsewhere. You're just like, I'm going to get out of cybersecurity altogether. I'm just going to live out on a farm and grow beets. I actually know somebody who did that and is now raising horses. So it's just one of those things. It's like, yeah, we need everybody. And if we can have more people in cybersecurity, that'd be great, because that helps us not burn out as an industry. I actually didn't answer your question. I don't know what it was.
You totally did.
Awesome.
There's a lot to unpack in all that, right? And you look at first and foremost, like to your point, like we are human, we are built for relationships of all sorts, and I can attest to this, as can any service member who did any kind of amount of time. I know a lot of first responders are in the same camp. It's so easy to lose your identity in chasing the purpose, right? And then as we hopefully mature over time and we evolve, and sometimes it'll result in internal conflict, right? Where your external stressors and what you really want to do are they're colliding. And I think that's the thing that I really took away from your article was we already have substantive mental health challenges to begin with. And now, this is real. And then we have, people who they've got families, they've got livelihoods, and then there's these other pressures. And at the end of the day, and that ends up being an individual decision, which way they end up levitating to kind of, whether they're just going to pull in and say, you know what, I'm done, or potentially they choose, more sadly than not, that possibly chase the job over the other things. And to your point, we're only on this earth for a fixed amount of time. And here in the United States in particular, we're probably the worst offenders of work-life balance. So we don't have it right, but we're all about choice too. And I think this is one of the things, I get everything that, and I largely agree with everything you're saying, but at the end of the day, what we're seeing here is this crossroads of people making decisions that best suit themselves, which I'm a big fan of, but the greater industry is going to pay the price. So besides the fact that potentially have people walking away, what do you think that this burnout what does it mean for the future, besides potentially, not having our more seasoned people?
Yeah, I'm going to make a call right here. I think we're losing the war on cybercrime. I think you might agree with that. We're going to lose so many more people in the future that we can't backfill fast enough. Not only that, we don't have the junior ranks to fill our shoes in the first place. So I think in the near future, give it 10, 15, 20 years, I think companies are going to start realizing this, and they're only going to find the anomalies, like you had mentioned earlier. We're going to understand what baseline looks like. We want to see what normal looks like on every day, and we're just going to fight the fires as they come up. And I really think that's what's going to happen. There's going to be less of the whole blue teaming and being, the protect aspect of the cybersecurity framework, right? And then you're just going to just put out fires, incidents. And I think that's what our industry is going to end up doing, is a lot more people are going to be doing security but not as a full-time job. It's going to be shared responsibility across the developers, engineers, the operations people, leadership, right? They're going to start taking on more of that, and it's not going to be done as well as it is today. So I will say, I am going to put my stake in the ground. 15, 20 years, we're going to see a major shift in the industry where the firefighters and less of the builders and constructors that we have today, and they're just going to take a look at anomalies that exist every day and just fight those instead of trying to do all the prevention things that we're doing now. So anyway, putting that stake in the ground. What do you think?
It's an interesting stake in the ground, and sadly, I don't even think it's 10 to 15 years down the line, personally. What is most concerning, right? Because on one hand, we see the big pivot towards risk-based security, huge fan, right, in better decision-making. But with what you describe, if that holds true, it becomes a very apathetic way of doing business, right? And if the designers of all sorts don't do a better job, then we can never have any, granted, you can't have privacy without security, right? At the end of the day, and we can make that argument all day long, that we're probably not going to ever get to any real point here in where we live, because data is monetized at the end of the day. It's a very much a commodity that is, highly sought after. So oftentimes what frustrates me about this industry is I feel like we've often just kind of tried to reinvent the wheel, and we've gone it alone. And we look at some of what's happening, something like awareness training, right? And only of late have we really seen a call for the human psychology part of it, right? How do you shape behavior? And I think with what you described, the thing that immediately came to my mind is, do we need some studies out there on, and again, against other protection-oriented occupations, right? Because again, we might be the newest to the table, but there's a lot of commonality, right? I think you would agree there. It's just a different tools and a different thing that we're protecting at sorts. But without doing that, I think we're missing the mark, right? And to your point, we're very reactive, very much in firefighting mode. And that's going to be worst case, because I think some of us have been holding out that we're finally kind of turning the page.
No, I don't think so. You're more pessimistic than me, apparently. But yeah, I think in 10, 15, 20 years, there's going to be so few of us in the industry that can actually do the work in terms of like really building a security program. I think we're just going to be left with people fighting fires. And I think companies are going to be okay with that, because it's it's a losing proposition. Like there's just so much out there, and it feels like you're just overwhelmed at times. And I think that's causing the burnout again. It really is. And so I think companies are just going to wise up and be like, we can't block everything. So we're just going to fight the fires as they happen. And we're okay with that, right? Like we're going to block exfiltration as much as possible and protect as much data as possible, so we don't have to pay any fines. And, people's data is going to get stolen anyway. So we're going to try to protect it as good as possible. And then as, things happen, we're just going to throw people at it. I think that's what's going to happen, because we're just going to have fewer people in the industry that really have that veteran experience that you actually need in order to do this well. And that's it. I think governments and corporate entities and nonprofits, I think honestly, maybe I'm just in that space right now, really pessimistic, John, but I think they're going to give up. I really do. I hope that's not true. I really hope, because I'm still a citizen of this world. I would love to see my data protected and the future of my children safe, right? But I don't know. I'm at that point where I'm like, John, I don't know, man. I don't know.
But you keep it real, and that's what we need to absolutely have these conversations. And because we look at, there's a lot of folks, subscribe to the thing, well, governments need to be doing more. We need more regulation. Well, with what you described, and I'm not saying that regulations aren't helpful and to set the minimum standard, but at the end of the day, like you can't legislate morality, and bad people are going to do bad things. Like we know that. But at the end of the day, the regulatory measures and levers that we put in place really mostly they often disadvantage the smaller companies. And again, there's no one size fits all. And we are in an occupation that is global in nature, but at least again, here in the United States, small business is a large section of it. And we can have conversation about, how, teaming and partnering and their criticality and all this stuff, but we're only as good as our weakest link. And so we have we definitely have a long road ahead of us. So how can we, as leaders such as yourself, right, and others that are out there, what can we do? How do you combat it?
How do we combat the burnout, or in the 10, 15, 20 years when we're all extinct?
Well, let's worry about the burnout, right? Because
all right. So this is something I love to do, like as a leader. I just like to set expectations with my team. If you aren't doing this with your team, please consider doing it, just because it's really helpful. So what I do is I sit down with each direct report. I go through their job description line by line, every single bullet. I say, this is what I expect from you. This is what the success looks like for this one bullet. And then we align all their work that they're currently doing to the job description. And if there's something that they're doing that isn't aligned directly to their job description, like maybe consider either telling them that it's not their job, because maybe it isn't, or at least modifying their job description so they understand it's their expected work, that you expect that work from them. And that's absolutely okay. That's your prerogative as a manager. But have that expectation meeting and set those expectations early on with your direct reports, at least twice a year, semi-annual, right? So have those expectations, just because the team member is going to understand exactly what's expected of them, and they can work their day around that, instead of just having this nebulous idea of what is expected of them, and they don't understand what success might look like, they're going to keep reaching for something that they don't know the end goal for. So if they're continuously doing that, they are going to burn out because they haven't been given that goal. And this really works well, even from the junior all the way to the senior level folks. For the senior level folks, you're going to have more conversations like, hey, I need you to own this initiative or make sure this program and project runs successfully, right? Like that's okay too, if it's a longer term thing, but they at least understand what's expected of them. And that is such a huge, huge thing when it comes to reducing burnout or the possibility of burnout. That's for sure one thing. Another thing is just normalizing the conversation and be like, hey, 9 to 5, 8 to 6, whatever normal looks like in your company, you want to reinforce that. Say as a leader, be like, I want to keep the business hours the way it is, business hours. We are covered in terms of on-call shift. We're going to have shift work, blah, 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 for stuff that requires it. But for everything else, like I don't want you to be online after a certain hour. I don't want you to be working on the weekends. And then you do that yourself as a leader. Make sure you're not answering emails at 2 a.m. or being on Slack until 11 p.m. Like make sure your team sees that, because if they see the opposite and they see you working that late or working on the weekends, they're going to think that that's normal. And that's what you want to do and what you want to see from them. And that just contributes to the burnout so badly, John, I will tell you. And I know this from personal experience. I mean, I used to see my managers online at 2 in the morning. I'd be slacking them, right, just to make sure that they knew I was working hard. But man, that just makes you burn out so much faster.
And it all boils down to taking care of your people. Like the first part of it, what you described, what scope creep is so real in our industry, right? Like at the end of the day, and I'd say I would go as far to say it happens in a lot of jobs, and it's frustrating. And that's one of the things I always want to make sure, because first and foremost, if you're acknowledging it, then you're also seen as an advocate for them to make sure that, not only do you need to adjust the job description, but is there a conversation about compensation, right? And I think what I hear from you in all studies up to now have really largely supported is, at the end of the day, and I'm not, dismissing the burnout component because it's so important, but there are a lot of people that are going to tolerate a lot more stress, strife, BS if they like their manager. Right? Like, are you going the extra mile for your people? Right. And you're absolutely correct. We have a lot of flexibility and discretion as managers and leaders to make sure that we're taking care of their folks. And, and when you look at retention challenges to begin with, listen, salaries can only continue to go so high. And that's one of the things that, we've not really done a good job in that. And I understand the whole supply and demand thing, but then you're also disadvantaging existing staff, right? And that's something that I really am very mindful of, because it's not right. Because, just because you can doesn't mean you should. But all of these things, and, making sure, to your point, listen, in some job work that's really very much rigid, time oriented, you got deadlines. Okay, that's cool. Other stuff where it's a little bit more methodic, something comes up, I don't care as long as you get your work done, right? What works for you and that balance for them, because life happens, right? Like all of our life events that do not happen from 6 p.m. until 8 the next morning. You know that.
Yeah, absolutely. And things happen that are bad. And we're in the middle of a freaking pandemic, and it's scary out there. And the whole climate change thing, man, if you believe in that stuff, I feel bad for you. I also believe in it, so I feel bad for me. But the whole, the world is falling apart sometimes, it feels like, right? But then you take a deep breath, walk outside and you look, nature is beautiful. Everyone's being kind to each other. Okay, actually, life isn't that bad, right? So get back in there and do your work. But in terms of having those conversations with your team members, it starts as a leader, like you said, John. As a leader, you should be having those conversations. You should be setting expectations, telling people what success looks like in terms of a normal work day, instead of just be like, I need you to work 12 hours a day. I expect you to work 6 hours, 6 days a week. That is not reasonable. And you're just hurting yourself, because your team members aren't going to be producing at the level that you want them to. So do yourself a favor and help your teammates out. Tell them that it's okay to just work what you're expected from them, what's expected of them in the amount of time that they're given to work, because they're only paid X number of hours a week. So set that expectation with them and they're going to appreciate that. And then they're going to do great work for you. And again, like you said, John, you're going to go the extra mile for a manager that you actually care about. That is so true. I mean, I can name, I think I've had like 14 or 15 managers by this time in my career. I can name only one or two of them that I would go the extra mile for. And it's because they actually cared about my work-life balance and my mental health. So those are the people I would just, follow around and work for. And I could tell you the two or three that I would never, ever work for again, right? Because they were just so exploitative and abusive of my time and energy. And I expect other people are going to feel the same way.
So that's a great segue to, for those individuals that might be in those situations, what can they do?
So you need to push back too. Like there's the whole like Puritan work ethic, like we had mentioned. You have to set the expectation also. So if you are working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, that's on you. You can stop that. You can control that, right? You just start not doing that. You can say, hey, I've been working extra hours and, I really can't sustain this. Just have that conversation with your leader and just say like, I probably just set the expectation wrong, but let's just re-normalize this thing, right? And say, I'm going to work from this time to this time, expect me online from this time to this time. I'll be available when and when, right? Like set that expectation or like push back on like unreasonable things if your manager is asking for. Now, if you don't feel safe doing that, right? Maybe the political climate isn't in your favor. You just don't have the standing within your company. I'm sure that's true sometimes. You have two legs. You can walk out that job. You can find another one. If you're in security, you can find another job very quickly. You know that, right? So if you're listening to this and you feel trapped, you're not. It's all in your head. Pick yourself up, wipe off your face, go get another job if the one that you have right now exploiting you is taking advantage of you, because you know it, everyone knows it. Get out of there and find a job that makes you happy and do work that keeps you sane and has that work-life balance that you always wanted. Because again, we're only on this earth for 80 something years. Actually, it's declined over the past couple of years, right? Do you see that, John? Like our life expectancy is like 6 years less than it was 2 years ago. My God.
So this morning, matter of fact, I was listening to the radio and they were talking about the average amount of time that we're happy for anything happening in our life is between 4 hours and 9 minutes and about 4.5 hours. So to your point, right? Like that's pretty disturbing, right? Like, so on average, right? And in the highest number, the 4 hours, I think it was 36 minutes they had said was when you were spending time with family. That's not a very long shelf life. And if you're not spending enough time with them, then it's very easy to get to that point, where you're just miserable, right? At the end of the day. And that affects our work, that affects our professional relationships, it affects your home life and all those things. I love what you said about you've got opportunity out in the industry. And I think that's something that often gets lost is, listen, at the end of the day, we can only change things within our control, right? Mm-hmm. You're in your respective sphere of influence. And if we think back to when we first started working, it was very small. Obviously, as we come up through the proverbial ranks, you get a little bit more, influence, but everybody's got a cap. So you get to a point in where you just might have to decide, okay, I've done all that I can. It's time for me to go look elsewhere. And if we look at trends that are out there with the shift from lifelong learning to lifelong employability, it really puts the onus on the individual to take control of their own livelihood, their happiness, and everything. And perhaps, and I'm not, listen, at the end of the day, I'm not advocating that everybody go quit their job tomorrow because that would be absolutely horrific. But if you're also in a position and company is losing a lot of people, I also believe listen, where there's smoke, there's fire. If you're having a lot of turnover, what is causing that? There's a responsibility by the leadership to kind of look at the climate. And are you expecting people to work 80 hours a week on a 40-hour based salary? That's not right either. And I think that these are some of these conversations we need to continue to force. So for all you young folks out there or new to the profession, because I don't want to just say young, because there's a lot of folks that have, they saw the opportunity to come into this industry. You heard it firsthand from Naomi herself is, giving you some tips and tricks and advice, things to force the conversation, look out for yourself. I think you would probably second me in saying that mentors outside of your potential company, right, and networking is a good thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's how I find most of my jobs. I think like all of my jobs except for one has come through people. And that's exactly right. Like make friends out there. You always want to work on those soft skills and communication. It's going to take you a long way. Be nice, be kind, understand that people have knowledge and experiences that you might not have. And if you bring that humility to the table every time, you're going to get the job. So that's definitely one thing. Now, I will say, sorry if I like insulted anyone, if I said that it is easy to get a job in the industry. No, it's not that easy if you're just starting out. So I want to make sure I'm setting that expectation with you all. But if you are finding yourself in that position that you are currently, mid-senior or senior level person and you're burned out, you know that you have other options and you can also walk and you can go to a place that actually respects your time and your work-life balance and your mental health.
Expectation management is absolutely important there, right? We see that, and I'm so happy that you actually brought up that point, because we've really we've largely done a disservice to a lot of individuals who have paid a lot of money, potentially spent a lot of time to attain academic, educational, training goals, to be then left on the sidelines, right? And we bear that responsibility as an industry. I follow you on social media. I know you're calling it out. I know some others that I follow. I commend you for the work you're doing, but it's going to take a village, because our one-off efforts are simply not scalable. So I want to thank Naomi again for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks, John. It was a great conversation.
Thanks, Naomi. Again, I'm John Brandt. This is CyberPros. Thanks for tuning in.